talking to you about age structure and genetic diversity among sea otters. So the sea otter will generally live between 10 and 20 years and maintain a relative constant age structure. So there was a study done in Alaska, and it was found that the most common age range was within pups was 0 to 1 years of age. So this information shows that the sea otter exhibits type 2 survivorship trends. This means that throughout their lives, the sea otter has a relatively constant mortality rate. Although this may be true, there is still a large amount of pups that die before they reach the age of 2 years. Although that pattern would suggest a type 3 survivorship curve, it is not that case because sea otters produce very few offspring, which is a very atypical type 3 survivorship species. So the genetic diversity of the sea otter population was greatly impacted and reduced as a result of a fur trade. So the extirpation of the sea otter from the west coast meant that all the genetic diversity within that population was wiped out. When a population of sea otters was reintroduced into the environment many decades later, the same genetic diversity did not exist. So now I'm going to be talking to you about the current and past population size of sea otters. So hundreds and thousands of sea otters used to live on the Pacific coast between northern Mexico to Alaska. But the fur trade, which began in the 1700s, almost wiped out all of them. The last sea otter in BC was shot near Kayukwat on the west coast of Vancouver Island in 1929. So approximately 89 sea otters were slowly reintroduced to BC between 1969 and 1972. And now there are around 2,500 living off Vancouver Island and off the BC coast near Goose Island. So unfortunately, as amazing as these animals are, they have been considered endangered for the past 45 years. This trend is due in large to the historic fur trade in North America, which saw hunters targeting sea otters for fur accessories popular in Europe. It was largely the commercial value of the sea otter's furs that led to the massive decline and near extinction of the sea otter population. So as you guys know, sea otters are now endangered. And there are a couple of major causes of death among sea otters, but I'm gonna tell you guys the major ones. So major causes of death among sea otters are lack of food and predators. So the latter include bald eagles, and bald eagles are a significant cause amongst sea otter pups, so in pup death, killer whales, and sharks. So the greatest threat comes from environmental contamination, which contributes to the great decline in the sea otter's population.
So the ICUN still lists the sea otter as an endangered species, and some threats to sea otters are oil spills, illegal kills, entanglement in fishing gear, directed harvest, and other human activities. So the influence of some or all these current threats by humans may affect behavior, the physiology, immune response, habitat use, and results in indirect or direct mortality. Historically, uncontrolled human exploitation during the maritime fur trade in 1920s was the single biggest threat that resulted directly through increased mortality to the near extinction of the species. The Nucha, Malta, Haida, and other First Nations of coastal British Columbia used the warm and luxurious pelts for chiefs. The sea otter pelts were given to use for ceremonies, weddings, and funerals. The large-scale hunting, part of the maritime fur trade, were killing approximately 1 million of sea otters in the 18th century. The hunters and traders arrived from all over the world to meet foreign demand for sea pelts, which are one of the world's most valuable types of fur. Contamination from a spill has immediate and long-term effects on sea otters' recovery of their populations. Oil spills are considered a high level of concern because of the highly vulnerable nature of the sea otter to oil, and the trend of increased volume and frequency of transporting heavy oil products in Canadian Pacific waters. Fishing gear can cause entanglement, drowning including nets, traps, and fishing debris, and is a conservation concern for many maritime species. With respect to sea otters, this threat is difficult to quantify as drowned sea otters. So in BC, sea otters vanished completely until 89 released by government biologists on the west coast of Vancouver Island between 1969 and 1972. So spilling into the bays both north and south of the original release site with annual population growth of about 18%. In some areas, they had reached population of nearly 5,000 by 2008. By 2012, that number had grown to 25,000 sea otters. So, in Canada, sea otters are protected and managed under the Species of Risk Act. Since it came into force, DFO's Conservation and Protection Branch was dedicated 1,000 hours specifically to sea otter protection and enforcement in Canadian Pacific waters. Federal fishery officers have been protecting sea otters under the Marine Mammal Regulations of Fisheries Act for decades. So, fishery officers dedicate to raising public awareness of the recovery of sea otters, threats, and the legislation that protects them by attending community meetings, delivering public and school presentations. Officers also work with local First Nations to promote sea otter conservation. So now, let's go and find a Shvini!
Oh, hello there. So I'm going to be talking to you about the population changes of sea otters in Canada. So the population of sea otters have actually increased to 900 animals and has a growth rate of 17 to 20% each year. So sea otters are listed as a species of special concern under the Species at Risk Act, and research is focused on the recovery and conservation, which includes surveys to estimate the population trends, abundance and distribution, and studies of population health and genetics, as well as factors of this recovery. So this helps us understand how the population recovers and changes in nearshore ecosystems that occurs with reoccupation of sea otters. So recent population surveys between 2001 to 2004 indicate the Canadian sea otter population includes a minimum of 2,700 animals along the west coast of Vancouver, as well as 500 animals on the central BC coast. So sea otters have been reassessed by the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada as a special concern due to them repopulating 25 to 32% of their historical range, and the population is growing and expanding. Okay, so let's go down over here. So carrying capacity is actually the maximum population size that a habitat can sustain over an extended period of time. So I'm going to be talking to you more about carrying capacity. So researchers actually characterized habitat according to the complexity of nearshore intertidal and subtidal contours. They modeled the total area of complex habitat on the west coast of Vancouver Island by first calculating the complexity of the Chequalit Bay Kayukwat South region, where sea otters have been at equilibrium since the mid-1900s. So they then identified similar complex areas on the west coast of Vancouver Island and adopted the model to identify areas of similar complexity along the entire BC coast. Using the survey from CBKS region, they calculated otter densities for the habitat predicted by two models. They then calculated a linear coastwide carrying capacity of 52,459 sea otters. Density independent factors about sea otters. So let's go over here. So, do you guys want to know what density independent factors are? So they're basically abiotic events that affect population. And some of those factors can be like climate change, temperature, natural disasters, droughts, and even floods. So oil spills from offshore drilling or shipping are an immense threat to sea otter populations when sea otters come into contact with oil. It causes them for their fur to mat. So this prevents from insulating their bodies, and without this natural protection from the frigid water, sea otters can quickly die due to hypothermia. So the toxicity of oil can be harmful to sea otters, causing liver and kidney failure as well as severe damage to their lungs and eyes. So pollution on land runs off into the ocean, contaminating the sea otter's habitat. This can jeopardize their food sources as well as harm them directly. Sea otters are often contaminated with toxic pollutants and disease, causing parasites as a result of runoff in coastal waters. Okay guys, so let's go back over here. Sorry cameraman, if you could please move a little bit. Thanks. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about density dependent factors of sea otters. So you might be wondering, what is density dependent factors? So they're basically biotic interactions that affect the population of growth, such as predation and competition. So the sea otter habitat range is expanding because of the lack of food in their current range. Unfortunately, at the edge of their range, shark-bitten sea otters now account for more than half of the dead animals found. So this now exceeds all other causes of mortality combined, and in the last few years is actually driving a decline in the northern and southern parts of the population. The consumers are sea otters, which eat urchins, abalone, mussels, clams, crabs, snails, and about 40 other marine species. These species are the producers since they provide energy for sea otters' survival. So here's a video on a sea otter, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about population growth strategies. So the average life expectancy for males is 10 to 15 years, and for females it's 15 to 20 years. Most females reach sexual maturity between 2 to 5 years of age, with 88% maturing by age of 4. Most females have been observed to have the first pup by 3 to 4 years of age.
Reproductive rate is maximal at 5 years of age and remains stable through age of 15. Female otters typically mate numerous times during their estrus period, which lasts several days and occurs about once each year. Compared to other organisms such as mosquitoes and plants, sea otters have a longer lifespan and therefore use case-selected strategies. Sea otters have the responsibility to take care of their children and be in groups and produce few offspring per reproductive cycle.
So let's go over here. Down by the bay, where the watermelons grow. Wow, what a jungle. It looks kind of like the Amazon. I think I see cows down there.
Okay, so let's go see the oh shoot.
So federal fishery acts.
Age of 15. Female